Now, our next speaker, most of you are familiar with him on Bloomberg Television or the Brookings Institute or testifying before Congress regarding economic issues. He's the president of he created the largest short-selling investment firm in America, Kynikos, and he is the one who predicted the fall of Enron and so many other global financial crises long before anyone else did. But what we're going to hear from him today involves another aspect of his life, one that many aren't aware of. And that is, in addition to graduating from Yale University, he's president of the Board of Trustees of the Browning School. He's a trustee in the Nightingale Bamford School and a member of the New York Historical Society. He teaches at Yale University and is quite an historian and always makes history interesting. And so I'm very proud to bring to the microphone Jim Chanos.
Thank you, Andy, and to Mike for everything that you do for the community, the United States, and for fostering Greek-American relationships. Assistant Secretary Chalette, some wonderful words. We appreciate all you do as a member of the administration and on behalf of Greek-American relations. I want to thank my fellow co-sponsors for making these few days possible. This is a really, really good thing, I think, that you're all doing. And of course, the honorees, which we'll hear from shortly. General Korkas, thank you for making this trip. We look forward to hearing from you. To the Mahil family, good friends, it's wonderful you're here to accept this award. And Congressman Dingell, this is well regarded. I actually went to high school in Michigan, and you saved my bacon at an Enron hearing in the House in 2001, so that's for another time. Andy asked me to say a few words about the aspects of history that intersect both in financial and political and historical terms. Although we are honoring these great heroes, my own family's involvement with World War II was also there. I had my father and two uncles, like many people, signed up after Pearl Harbor. They volunteered. My father was the middle son. His older brother went right into the infantry and saw action in North Africa and Europe and France and Germany. His youngest brother signed up for the Navy and went on destroyer escorts and then a destroyer and saw quite a bit of action in the Pacific. My father, being the goody two-shoes of the three, was the only one of the three, as an immigrant son, who on his application and on his forms said that he spoke fluent Greek. He therefore spent the next year and a half defending Miami Beach, which I didn't find out about till 10 years ago. While his brothers were off seeing action, he was escorting debutantes in Palm Beach because he had language skills. And at the time, and it ties into this, we were unsure as to whether we were going to invade Sicily and Italy or, in Churchill's choice, invade Greece. So they kept back. And for those of you that know, Miami Beach, actually, if you go to Ocean and I believe it is 8th, there's a plaque right at the beach. Miami Beach was the largest technical training camp during World War II for communication skills, languages, code breaking, that sort of thing. I don't think a lot of you are looking for plaques when you go to South Beach, but it is there if you take a look. In any case, he ended up being thrown back in the pool and became a gunner on a B-24 Liberator and was sent to Asia, to the Philippines in 1944. And I pointed out to him that his goody two-shoes application may have just saved his life, but it kept him out of a B-24 over Europe in 43 and 44, where the survival rates were de minimis. In any case, I salute all of you for what you've done and all that you represent. Now, Andy asked me again to sort of intersect as best I could with some history. One of my day jobs, as he indicated, when I'm not helping out Father Alex as his assistant, is to teach history at the graduate level at Yale, specifically history of financial fraud. But as part of that, we see that patterns repeat. certain things can be taught to be avoided. And as I reviewed the history of the Greek effort and the Allied effort in 1940 and 41 and intersposed it on some more recent financial history, some things jumped out at me. As an amateur historian, there were some, I'm not going to call them, well, let's just call them interesting facts about those days of 1940 and 41. As Assistant Secretary Challet indicated, it was the first Allied victory over Axis forces in October of 1940. But here's the interesting thing that I didn't know. Do you know why Mussolini chose the last week of October to invade Greece? Mussolini felt so humiliated that Hitler did not bring him into the discussions on the invasion of the Low Countries in France. He waited until Adolf Hitler was in the city of Florence and told him that morning excitedly, "My Fuhrer, our troops have crossed from Albania into Greece." A lot of people don't know that fact. In addition, the Balkan campaign, Operation Marita Merkur, in 1941, had the following salient facts that a lot of us don't know, or I think might not know. The first was that it was, of course, the first air assault in World War II. That was the island Battle of Crete, which the award is named after. And that's fairly well known. What's not so well known, it was the first use of the Allies, the British, of the Enigma information that they had uncovered by breaking the German codes. And then for those of you that know that history, there was a lot of concern that by intercepting the proper forces at the right time and right place, the Germans might be alerted to the fact that the Brits had broken the codes in 1941. But Crete was considered of such significance that they decided for the first time to use information that they had from the Enigma machine to actually change some of their naval operations. But finally, and most importantly, and I know General Korkus obviously must know this, but it was the first time that Axis forces had faced organized and spirited defense of a country by civilians as well as the armed forces. And if you go back and read the source documents and from the German General Staff diaries that Franz Halder kept, you will see real concern on behalf of senior German officers that they were facing such spirited defense, talking about people taking guns from museums, flintlocks, to defend Crete. Priests going after soldiers. I mean, unbelievable tales of heroics that made it into Halder's war diaries. And a number of German officers contemporaneously at the time expressed concern that this would start a trend with other civilians becoming combatants, which of course they found out to rue the day in the Soviet Union, France, and other places later. The Greeks were the first to do that. But my specialty is not military history, it's financial history. And I just want to set the stage for the possibility down the road of something I think that all of us would like to see. And that's a solution to the financial problems that our mother country is facing. But in order to talk about a possible solution, we have to understand what happened in the past. And that's when things get a little interesting. Because as I've told a number of you, the largest defaulter on debts in the 20th century in Europe, of course, was Germany, for obvious reasons. And this is not to castigate the German people. I speak German. I worked in Germany for a year. I have the highest respect for that country. But be that as it may, we can go back even further to the 19th century and look at the history of inter-European debt reschedulings and restructurings. And there we find some interesting facts. We find out, for example, that the Allies imposed very harsh terms on the French following the Napoleonic Wars. The French were obligated to pay what amounted to about 20 to 25% of their GDP at that time to Allied war reparations, as well as give up substantial territories. In addition, besides many British and other loans that were lent to the Tsar for all kinds of projects that were defaulted on ultimately, we had the very serious and harsh terms that Germany and specifically Prussia laid on France following the Franco-Prussian War in 1871. Those reparations, of course, were not forgotten by the French as we entered into the First World War. But before the reparations and debts needed to be settled after the First World War, Germany again imposed harsh terms on one of our previous allies, Russia. In the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk in 1918, Germany set very harsh terms upon Russia. That unfortunately set the stage for the talks at Versailles in Paris in 1919 and the extremely harsh terms that were placed on Germany by the Allies, not least due to the fact that the Allies themselves owed a lot of money to us. The U.S. in effect financed quite a bit of the Allied war effort. So the Allies had external debts, France and England to the U.S. Germany, on the other hand, not being able to access international financial markets after 1914, borrowed its money, and by the way, it spent 8 times its tax revenues on the war, World War I. The Allies spent 4 times. They borrowed internally from their own people. They issued bonds to German citizens during 1914 to 1918. Despite the protestations of members of the committee like John Maynard Keynes, who warned about putting harsh terms on a supplicant Germany and what it might lead to in the future, the Allies nonetheless pressed home their claims. When Germany could not make payments in 1922, the French, supported by the English, moved into the Ruhr to seize assets. This had two important near-term problems, created two important near-term problems. Number one, it set Germany off on a hyperinflation, and the Germans began printing currency. And while this led, some believe, to the rise of fascism and National Socialism, it also had the effect of wiping out their domestic debt. So they not only defaulted to their external creditors, they defaulted to their internal creditors by printing marks. And we've all seen the photos of German housewives with wheelbarrows. This clearly set in motion the march to fascism and National Socialism. So we can see that these are very, very important things, not that wander into the arena of national security and global affairs, not just in my world of finance. With what happened then in World War II, for which we're honoring today, a whole different set of solutions were raised. Because as Hitler gained power in 1932 and 33, first President Hoover realized that Germany probably couldn't pay, urged the Allies to do something. Hitler ultimately repudiated the debts in 33 to 39 and embarked upon his war of destruction. When that war ended, there was an immediate conference in Paris, 1945. And the Paris conference, interestingly enough, not only was looking at what happened because of World War II, but the French were still holding a grudge. They wanted to still find out what was going to happen to the reparations they were still owed under World War I. The Americans took a much different tack. And unlike Wilson administration's unwillingness to bend on what the Allies owed them, in effect letting Germany off the hook in 1922, this time there was a much more pragmatic view, and there's a wonderful new book out on the Marshall Plan discussing how the administration, Truman administration, as well as the senator from Michigan, Vandenberg, came to the understanding that crushing Germany again was in no one's interest, and that although it had embarked upon a war of aggression, a war of destruction, that they had to look forward, not backwards. And so, in 1947, the Economic Recovery Plan, we know as the Marshall Plan, was put forward. Greece received over $1 billion in U.S. aid at that time, but unfortunately was embroiled in its own civil war, and much of that aid went squandered. In 1953, the Allies got together in London, and this time put a much more comprehensive plan on board for Germany as well as the Allies. They forgave half of the World War I debts, and they let them restructure the rest into the future. Interestingly, they put a caveat in there. Because Germany had been divided in two by the Soviets and the Western powers, they let Germany off the hook unless it should be reunified. In 1990, the first bond offering the German nation did as a reunified country, interestingly, did not go to rebuilding East Germany. It actually was the first bond offering used to pay off the World War I debts under the 1953 treaty. Why am I going through all this? Well, I'll give you a caveat. I'm not a lawyer. I sometimes play one when giving keynote speeches. But Greece's claims, to me, after reading the 1953 treaty, may have some merit. The reparations, it is no doubt, in my view, that they probably have to give up on. But the unforced loans that the Germans and the Italians, I might add, under Mussolini, required Greece to make may have standing. Whether or not that will win in a court of law in Europe or The Hague, it may win in the court of public opinion, which I think Greece needs. I think that if you look at the unforced loans that were not covered by this treaty, the amount today may be as much as $100 billion US at nominal rates of interest from 1945. This claim is being pursued formally now by the Samaras-led coalition government, and I wish them luck. But more importantly, I think if we step back to this cycle of 19th and 20th century war, reparations, finger-pointing, we have to understand that every once in a while someone came to the fore that saw beyond the past and to the future, like Marshall, and said, okay, let's expunge this, let's restructure this, but let's move forward. No one is going to get better if we saddle these countries with obligations that they incurred in the past and cannot pay. And I say to you that if we can forgive debts that are forged through the horrors of aggression and war, can we not restructure debts that are incurred due to trade? I think it is time that someone steps up in the EU and takes a look at the inter-debt situations. It's not just Greece. And says, is there a way the EU can be strengthened by a modern-day Marshall Plan equivalent, financial Marshall Plan, based on imperfect trade flows and currencies that are imbalanced, and come up with a political solution? I think there is. And I think that more people should be calling for that. And so with that, our history lesson on finance and reparations is over, and we are going to actually honor the people that we're here to honor. Thank you very much.